We have a God who is great, He is powerful, He is strong, and there is no one like Him. Water you turn into wine, open the eyes of the blind. There's no one like you, none like you. Into the darkness you shine, out of the ashes we rise. There's no one like you, none like you. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. Into the darkness you shine, out of the ashes we rise. There's no one like you, none like you. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what can stand against? And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what can stand against? What can stand against? What can stand against? What can stand against? Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what can stand against? And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what can stand against? What can stand against? What can stand against? What can stand against?
So we look into the life. We'll dive into Joseph today. And I hope you read already Genesis chapter 37. So as we look into the life of Joseph as well as his leadership, let's first ask the question, which I think is very relevant. Question is, are leaders coming from dysfunctional homes ever be effective leaders of God? If leaders coming from bad family background, unhealthy family background, will they ever be effective leaders of today, or the leaders of the church? We always inherit from our homes. Whether we like it or not, we are the product of our homes. So I behave now, we behave now, whatever it is, and even so in leadership, it's because we got something from the homes. For example, we inherit from the homes like unforgiving spirit. We saw this from our homes. We saw this from our fathers and mothers, this unforgiving spirit. We also inherited from our homes unloving husband, unloving wives. We also inherited from our homes yung greed. We're not generous. Reason for that is because we haven't seen a visual aid of that in the home. And you will be surprised that many leaders, pastors, are not as generous as they should be. Greed seems to be more real than being generous. From our home, we inherit retaliation. From our home, we also experience what is known as nagtatanim ng galit. Now, all of these unhealthy behaviors didn't just happen in our lives. They are inherited from our homes. Unfaithfulness is one of those serious things we inherited from our homes. So if you and I are coming from this background, is there any hope for someone who comes from these dysfunctional homes? So this is, to me, is a valid question. So let's look at Joseph. We can never understand Joseph as a leader unless we understand his family background. All right? Let's look at, first of all, our overview of the messages that we will be hearing from the life of this man. There are 4 messages that I would like to discuss with you. Number 1, let's talk about Joseph's unlikely pedigree, his unlikely family background. I hope we will be able to appreciate understanding his family background would help you understand, whoa, he's worse than my family background. And we'll talk about that. And then secondly, we'll talk about the unusual preparations of Joseph as a servant. Very, very unusual preparations. Thirdly, we'll talk about the unexpected privileges that Joseph experienced, which is recorded in chapter 41. And finally, the last 3 chapters, 42 to 45, we'll talk about the uncharacteristic family party of Joseph. So my thesis would be in the form of question: are leaders coming from dysfunctional homes ever be effective leaders of God? We're going to prove this through the life of Joseph, whether or not, if you're coming from a family background that is really bad and dark, will I ever be an effective leaders of God? So let's talk about the unlikely pedigree of Joseph, found in 37. I hope some of you have read this particular chapter. It's a history, and therefore it's easy reading, really. We'll talk 2 things about that, 2 things about his unlikely pedigree. Number 1, we'll talk about his position in the family. There are 12 brothers. They did not include Dinah, which is actually 13, but he's got 12 in the family. We'll talk about his position and how important that is as far as his rank or position is concerned. First 4 verses. And then verses 4 to 28, we'll talk about his expulsion from the family. The way descriptions of what he was expelled from the family. So first, let's talk about his position or rank in the family. All right, the story of Joseph, I think, began when he was 17 years old. All right, so teenager, no? Teenager, 17. I think he was 17 when he was aware of his background, of his family. His father, Jacob, and his mother, who? Rachel. And during this teenage life of Joseph, he must have heard a lot, several times over, the love life of his parents. Because Hebrew loves to tell stories, that they're oral, they communicate, they pass on the informations and stories by storytelling. And so there's no doubt that Joseph must have heard many, many times over about his family background, especially the love life of his father and mother, Jacob and Raquel. He must have known that before his mother Raquel became the husband of Jacob, that Jacob waited for 14 years to get her because he was deceived of Leah. And when Rachel and Jacob finally got married, it took long time before the children came along. And when finally the child came along, Jacob could not hide his special affection upon his children. There were two children between Jacob and Rachel, Benjamin and Joseph. And the assumption being that Joseph must have witnessed the death of his mother when Benjamin was born. He must have heard about the story about his father's encounter with the angel, twice, that many times over, father's encounter with the angel. He must have also heard about his father's confrontation with Esau. Esau is the brother of Jacob. He must have also heard and witnessed about the massacre of the whole city of Shechem, because his half-sister Dinah was raped and violated by the son of the royal family. You see the drama in there? This being raped, and the whole family just came into rage and destroyed the whole city because of what they did to their sister. So at the early stage of Joseph's life, he knew the power of uncontrolled family anger. Not just one, but you're talking about wholesale anger, family. He must have known the power of uncontrolled family revenge at the early stage of his life. That's the kind of Joseph's background was. And possibly Joseph may have been right beside his mother when she died, giving birth to the second son, Benjamin. So Benjamin was his full-blooded brother. So let's highlight a few of his involvement in the family affairs. Very interesting how it is being highlighted in chapter 37. Let me just sum it up, the way in which his involvement to the family affairs. Joseph was the appointed reporter. I call it Joseph was the Bombo radio of his family. So whenever he joined with his brothers somewhere, and then when they returned, Joseph gave a bad report to his father. So anything bad, Joseph highlighted. That was his role. He was the appointed reporter. He was the Bombo radio. He was actually expert in telling the kalokohan of his brothers. It may have been that such a task was given to him. It's possible that the father appointed him, assigned him, this is your task. Whenever you see anything bad for your brothers, you tell me, and gave a report. So it must have been, it probably was given that role to him. It's a terrible responsibility, a contrabida in the family, a tattletale, a terrible role to play as part of the family. The other thing we notice about Joseph is that he was the father's favorite. Anyone here who is father's favorite, tatay's favorite? And so because of Jacob, his father's affection to Joseph, Joseph naturally dislodged Reuben as far as father's affection is concerned. Before Joseph came along, before Joseph came into being, Reuben was the favorite one. And when Joseph came along, he simply dislodged Reuben as far as the affection of the father is concerned. And what more to say about the other brothers? So an affection taken as an invitation to family feud and bitterness. I'm not sure if Jacob understood the implications of his affection. Maybe not. But his preference to Joseph was an invitation to family feud and family bitterness. Really, there's nothing Jacob could do about it. It was a situation he has no control about. The father's affection or special affection, which is perhaps the same as favoritism to Joseph, went beyond words and time. So Jacob visibly demonstrated this special affection, this preference, by giving him a colorful robe, a sign of prestige and honor. It was handcrafted. It was specially handcrafted for him. So the father visually illustrates his preferential love and treatment. Let's do some imagination, okay? Let's assume today is Christmas and you're all my children. So we have a tradition in Christmas that on 12 o'clock, opening of gifts, right? And all there, and you're all my children. Let's just assume that Jared is my Joseph. So on the day, on that evening of opening gifts, you get a screwdriver, some of you get pliers, some of you get broom, and Jared, Apple, Mac, desktop, complete with amenities, 200,000 pesos. You just make an imagination. This is what's going on in Joseph's family. You know, in my family, our youngest brothers, Buboy, always gets the money to buy bread. He, for some reason, of all the five of us, full brothers, he gets the preferential money, and then he can buy. We have to beg in order to eat from this fellow. So how do you feel if you're brothers, if you're Joseph's brother? How do you feel? Of course, jealous. Of course, furious. And that's how verse 4 describes the reactions of the brothers. So the result, he was alienated. Joseph was alienated from the rest of the siblings. Clearly, the undoing of the father. So let's summarize this as far as involvement of Joseph to this family. So Joseph came from a dysfunctional family. Definitely. Now, if God were to choose his servant to fulfill his purpose, why pick up a dysfunctional home like Joseph, like you, and like me? All of us came from dysfunctional homes, right? There is no perfect family. So why did God choose Joseph to fulfill his purpose? Joseph, whose pedigree is unlikely, his family background is unlikely. Joseph came from unlikely lineage. Now, to understand or perhaps to confuse you, let's compare the pedigree of Esau. Now, Esau, you remember, is a close family of Joseph. So the story of Joseph begins, chapter 37, but if you read chapter 36, a chapter before 37, we see the pedigree of Esau. Now, I'm going to refer that because maybe to confuse you. Genesis 36 records of Joseph's uncle Esau's lineage or pedigree. Now, Esau's image in the Bible is not a good image. Esau is always projected as contrabida, the villain, the rejected by God, because Esau preferred a short-term comfort over his privileged birthright. Remember, he sold his birthright just so that his immediate need is met. So Esau's image in the Bible is a villain, not a good image. But if you look at Esau's family background, which you read in Genesis 36, Esau came from a family of kings and rulers. Read that particular chapter, and you see that Esau came from a family of kings and rulers. Esau's family and pedigree are that of influence and power. Now, we have no time to detail that, but that's the background of Esau. Why not choose from that family? Why not choose people from, that kind of family, clean family? Why didn't God choose that family? Quite confusing. Why choose a man from a dysfunctional home and did not choose a man from a good pedigree? That's to confuse you, huh? Now, another thing we want to talk about Joseph is natural ability, which is recorded in chapter 37, 5 to 11. Joseph has a natural talent. He was a natural dreamer. That is, he can peep into the future events, predicting things and events to happen, and through the dreams. It's something he acquired. It was something given to him. It was his natural talents. He has a special and very unusual skill, namely to tell the events before the events will come to pass. Very, very unusual talents. A skill that he did not learn, he did not study. It was his by birth. It was good. It was for good reason and purpose. All of us were born with that natural talents. And Joseph got that and put to use when he became leader. Well, he had two dreams. The content and the meanings of the two dreams were very, very obvious as he related this to the brothers. They were scandalous by nature and also by culture and by traditions about the meaning of his dream. The dreams were about the brothers bowing down to Joseph. Can you imagine that? The youngest being bowed down by the older. So Joseph will rule according to his dream or prediction. Joseph will rule the older brothers. It is scandalous because in a culture like theirs, the younger or the youngest will naturally serve the older, not the other way around. But the way Joseph predicted the events, the elders, the brothers will bow down to him. So what's the consequence? Obviously, they hated him even more. So Joseph was hated because he was the father's favorite, and now they hated him even more. The first was because of preferential affection of the father, now because of innocent arrogance, active part of Joseph. So here, Joseph is twice hated, a terrible life to live in a family. A family should be a home of laughter, a home of rejoicing and celebration, but here it is, Joseph was placed in this family where he is twice hated. A very terrible life to live in a family. Favored, yet hated. That's Joseph's lot in the family. The darlings of the parents, yet despised by the siblings. Wow, it's a hard life to be with. So that's the status or the place, the position of Joseph in the family.